the most important events of the Vietnam War, captured in real time by CBS News crews.
Today's operation is the frustration of Vietnam in miniature. There is little doubt that American firepower can win a military victory here.
In the annals of American history, the Vietnam War stands out as a testament to the horrors of conflict and the lengths governments may go to maintain a favorable narrative. This video delves into 10 events, operations, and practices during the Vietnam War that, while once cloaked in secrecy, have since come to light, illuminating the troubling and often disturbing actions taken during this contentious period. Number 1. Operation Ranch Hand, Environmental Devastation, and Agent Orange. In the mid-1960s, amidst the thick foliage of Vietnam, the U.S. military initiated Operation Ranch Hand, a clandestine mission aiming to eradicate the lush vegetation that provided cover for the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces. It involved extensive spraying of herbicides, most notably Agent Orange, a dioxin-laden chemical named for the orange band on the drums in which it was shipped. Approximately 20 million gallons of this herbicide were sprayed over 10% of South Vietnam, affecting an estimated 4.8 million Vietnamese people. The devastating environmental and health impacts of Agent Orange became quickly apparent. Rivers and forests were transformed into barren wastelands. Crops vital to the Vietnamese economy and food supply were annihilated, resulting in widespread famine and malnutrition. But it was the horrifying health effects on humans that truly underscored the insidiousness of this chemical warfare. Countless Vietnamese civilians and soldiers, along with American troops, were exposed to the toxic defoliant. It caused numerous health problems ranging from skin and lung diseases to cancers and severe birth defects in subsequent generations. Many of these medical conditions were not officially recognized as related to Agent Orange exposure until years or even decades later. Over time, however, the cover-up started to unravel. Independent research and investigative journalism, along with increasing pressure from veterans groups, began to expose the scale of the disaster. The U.S. government was compelled to acknowledge the effects of Agent Orange finally. In 1991, Congress enacted the Agent Orange Act, acknowledging the link between exposure and certain diseases and providing for disability compensation for affected veterans. Yet, even today, full recognition and compensation for all those affected by Agent Orange remain elusive. The U.S. government has yet to accept full responsibility for the devastating health and environmental consequences in Vietnam itself, providing only limited remediation and assistance efforts. And many veterans still struggle to receive adequate medical care and compensation for their Agent Orange-related health issues. The legacy of Operation Ranch Hand, thus, remains a poignant reminder of a war crime concealed for too long. Number 2. My Lai Massacre, an atrocity uncovered. The morning of March 16, 1968, marked one of the most horrifying episodes of the Vietnam War, forever ingrained in history as the My Lai Massacre. In a small hamlet known as My Lai, American soldiers from Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, embarked on a search and destroy mission that ended in a nightmare of bloodshed and moral transgression. The men, under the command of Lieutenant William Calley, had been informed that the villagers of My Lai were Viet Cong sympathizers, and they were ordered to eliminate them. In the ensuing massacre, the troops killed between 347 and 504 unarmed civilians, including women, children, and the elderly. Most of the victims were shot, but reports also indicate instances of sexual abuse, torture, and mutilation. The horrifying events of My Lai were initially concealed, characterized as a successful engagement against enemy combatants. The U.S. Army's after-action report falsely claimed 128 Viet Cong had been killed, and made no mention of civilian casualties. However, rumors of a massacre slowly started to spread within the military ranks and beyond. A year later, the truth began to seep out, driven in large part by the courageous whistleblowing of helicopter pilot Hugh Thompson, Jr. Thompson, who had witnessed the atrocities from the air, reported the incident to his superiors, igniting the first internal investigation. Despite initially being dismissed, persistent efforts by Thompson and several others, including investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, eventually compelled the Army to take action. The Army eventually charged Lieutenant Calley and 25 other officers and enlisted men in connection with the massacre and its cover-up. However, many perceived the resulting courts-martial as an effort to scapegoat a few individuals for a systemic problem. Calley was the only one convicted, and his life sentence was reduced on appeal. He ended up serving only 3.5 years under house arrest. While the exposure of the My Lai massacre marked a pivotal moment in the Vietnam War and U.S. military history, many believe that justice was never adequately served. Furthermore, some speculate that My Lai was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of disregard for civilian lives during the conflict. Despite these lingering issues, the uncovering of the My Lai massacre stands as a potent symbol of the importance of transparency, accountability, and the moral conduct of war. Number 3. Operation Phoenix, controversial counterinsurgency. Born out of the murky depths of covert warfare, Operation Phoenix, or Phung Hoang by Vietnamese terms, was a contentious program conducted during the Vietnam War by the United States Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. Initially intended to destabilize the Viet Cong's VC infrastructure and neutralize its members, the operation became notorious for a series of alleged human rights abuses, turning into a significant cause of concern. The Phoenix program was launched in 1967, combining existing counterinsurgency programs under a single effort. Its purpose was to identify and neutralize the VC's shadow government, often referred to as the Viet Cong Infrastructure, VCI. The word neutralize was a euphemism, meaning to capture, turn, or kill. Operation Phoenix employed controversial methods in pursuit of its objectives. Besides conventional military attacks, it relied on a complex system of informants, secret detention centers, and extrajudicial executions. This operation was distinctively characterized by its focus on civilian targets, those who were part of the VCI, rather than uniformed combatants. At first, the U.S. government and military command dismissed these claims as communist propaganda. Even as mounting evidence painted a damning picture, official responses oscillated between denial and justification. This obfuscation was part of a broader pattern of efforts to control the narrative of the Vietnam War and maintain domestic and international support. The truth about Operation Phoenix only emerged gradually, largely due to investigative journalism. Journalist Douglas Valentine was a notable figure in these efforts. After extensive interviews and research, he wrote The Phoenix Program, revealing the operation's dark underbelly to the broader public. Revelations about Operation Phoenix's activities shook the American conscience, contributing to growing disillusionment with the war. These revelations also ignited a wider debate on the ethical boundaries of counterinsurgency efforts, a debate that continues to resonate in modern conflict zones. Despite the controversy, no official investigation or accountability for the Phoenix program's alleged abuses has ever been established. Many of those involved in the program, including some accused of overseeing human rights abuses, went on to have successful careers within the U.S. government and military. Moreover, while the program officially ended in 1972, some argue that its strategies and methods have been echoed in subsequent U.S. counterterrorism and counterinsurgency efforts, notably in Iraq and Afghanistan. In the end, Operation Phoenix serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, the moral complexities of war, and the necessity of accountability and transparency. The controversy surrounding this program underscores the vital importance of ethical considerations in military strategy, not just for the sake of justice, but also for the successful completion of a mission and the preservation of a nation's moral standing. Number 4. Tiger Force Atrocities, a hidden chapter. The Vietnam War is replete with chilling tales of human rights abuses and wartime atrocities. Few, however, are as grim as the story of Tiger Force, a small, elite unit of the 1st Battalion, 327th Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, whose acts of brutality went largely unnoticed and unpunished for decades. Tiger Force, originally created to be a highly mobile reconnaissance unit, adept at jungle warfare, earned a reputation for unparalleled ferocity during 1967. That year, amid the jungles and hamlets of the Central Highlands, They were implicated in a series of shocking atrocities against Vietnamese civilians. The events included indiscriminate slaughter of unarmed men, women, and children, mutilation of bodies, and other horrific acts of violence. The brutality was so pervasive that some American servicemen who witnessed their actions reported them to the military chain of command. The U.S. Army did initiate an investigation into Tiger Force's activities in 1971, prompted by the courage of veterans who spoke out about what they had witnessed. The investigation lasted 4.5 years, the longest known to have occurred during the Vietnam War. The probe reportedly found evidence of war crimes, including murder, assault, and torture. It allegedly identified 18 members of Tiger Force as suspects in 20 war crime cases. However, in a disturbing turn of events, these findings were never acted upon. The investigative files were buried within the bureaucracy of the Pentagon, and no criminal charges were ever brought against the implicated soldiers. The veil of silence drawn over Tiger Force's actions remained largely undisturbed until 2003, when the Toledo Blade newspaper conducted an extensive investigation into the matter. Through a series of articles, the Toledo Blade brought to light the findings of the Army's original investigation and tracked down both veterans of Tiger Force and Vietnamese survivors of the unit's atrocities. These articles painted a disturbing picture of a military unit operating with near impunity and a government more interested in covering up potential scandals than ensuring accountability. The Blade's investigation provoked public outrage and led to calls for a renewed inquiry into Tiger Force's actions. However, the Department of Defense declined to reopen the investigation. It cited the passage of time and the death of several key witnesses as reasons. As a result, the Tiger Force case remains a dark chapter of the Vietnam War that has seen little in the way of official recognition or justice. Moreover, it underscores the crucial role of independent journalism in uncovering the truth. Without the Toledo Blade's reporting, the atrocities committed by Tiger Force might have remained buried forever. This chapter of history emphasizes the need for ongoing vigilance, transparency, and commitment to justice, even in the face of uncomfortable truths about our past. Number 5. The CIA's secret war in Laos, unacknowledged bombing campaign. Among the hidden layers of the Vietnam War, one of the most substantial yet least acknowledged is the covert war waged in Laos. From 1964 to 1973, under the direction of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, the United States conducted an extensive bombing campaign in Laos, making it one of the most heavily bombed countries per capita in history. This secret war, concealed from the American public and Congress, forever changed the landscape and society of a small, neutral nation. The bombing campaign in Laos was a part of a wider CIA-led operation designed to disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the North Vietnamese supply route that ran through Laos, and to support the Royal Lao government against the Pathet Lao communist movement. The campaign, named Operation Barrel Roll, began in 1964 and escalated over the years, peaking between 1968 and 1973. The devastating impact on Laos was profound. The relentless bombing killed tens of thousands of Laotians, displaced hundreds of thousands more, and left a significant part of the country contaminated with unexploded ordnance, UXO, particularly cluster bombs, that continue to maim and kill people to this day. Yet the U.S. government denied involvement in Laos for many years. It wasn't until 1970, 6 years after the bombing began, that the operation was publicly acknowledged by the Nixon administration. Even then, the scale and impact of the campaign were downplayed, and full details only emerged years later. The truth about the CIA's secret war in Laos was gradually unveiled through declassified documents, survivor testimonies, and journalistic investigations. These revelations highlighted not only the unprecedented scale of the bombing, but also the troubling bypassing of democratic oversight in the conduct of foreign policy. The legacy of the secret war still haunts Laos. Despite some efforts by the U.S. government and international organizations to clear UXOs and aid victims, progress is slow, and the resources committed are widely regarded as inadequate compared to the scale of the problem. The secret war in Laos serves as a cautionary tale about the unchecked exercise of power and the importance of governmental transparency. It underscores the potential for great harm when the conduct of foreign policy is insulated from public scrutiny and democratic accountability. This clandestine chapter of the Vietnam War forces us to grapple with difficult questions about the costs of war, the responsibility towards its victims, and the ethical limits of state secrecy. Number 6. Operation Menu, Covert Cambodian Bombing. In the shadow of the Vietnam War, another covert operation brewed, often overlooked in the broader narrative of the conflict. This hidden chapter, known as Operation Menu, saw the United States engage in a secret bombing campaign in Cambodia, a neutral country, in an attempt to disrupt North Vietnamese and Viet Cong supply routes and bases. Operation Menu, which spanned from March 1969 to May 1970, was conducted without the knowledge or approval of the U.S. Congress and was kept secret from the American public. The operation primarily targeted the Ho Chi Minh Trail sections running through eastern Cambodia and the sanctuaries of the communist forces within Cambodia's borders. The campaign began under the authorization of President Richard Nixon and his national security advisor, Henry Kissinger. Under their direction, the U.S. dropped a staggering 540,000 tons of bombs on Cambodia, resulting in a significant number of civilian casualties. The exact number of casualties remains a point of contention, with estimates ranging from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. News of the secret bombing campaign only reached the American public and Congress in 1973, nearly 3 years after Operation Menu had concluded, when investigative journalist Seymour Hersh broke the story. The disclosure ignited a firestorm of controversy, leading to constitutional crisis and public protests. It was one of the key events that prompted Congress to pass the War Powers Act in 1973, aimed at restricting the president's ability to conduct military actions without congressional approval. However, the controversy over Operation Menu was not confined to the U.S. The secret bombing campaign had far-reaching consequences in Cambodia, contributing to the destabilization of the country and the rise of the Khmer Rouge, the brutal communist regime responsible for one of the worst genocides of the 20th century. The legacy of Operation Menu continues to reverberate in modern discussions about the conduct of war and the balance of power within the U.S. government. It highlights the necessity of oversight and accountability in military action, the dangers of excessive secrecy in foreign policy, and the potential human cost of such operations. Furthermore, Operation Menu stands as a stark reminder of how the actions of powerful nations can have devastating impacts on smaller, less powerful ones. It underscores the responsibility of world powers to adhere to international law, respect the sovereignty of other nations, and prevent harm to innocent civilians. Number 7. Pentagon Papers, a conspiracy of silence. One of the most significant revelations about the U.S. government's conduct during the Vietnam War came not from a battlefield report, but a 7,000-page top-secret Pentagon study. Dubbed the Pentagon Papers, this massive document detailed the U.S. political and military involvement in Vietnam from 1945 to 1967, and exposed a pattern of deception by the U.S. government, extending over 4 successive administrations. The Pentagon Papers were commissioned in 1967 by Robert McNamara, then U.S. Secretary of Defense, to create an encyclopedic history of the U.S. involvement in Vietnam. However, the documents were kept classified, hidden away from the public and most of the government until 1971, when they were leaked to the press by Daniel Ellsberg, a military analyst. The publication of the Pentagon Papers in the New York Times and other newspapers ignited a firestorm of controversy. The Nixon administration, desperate to prevent further disclosure, went to the Supreme Court to stop publication. But in a landmark decision for press freedom, the court ruled in favor of the newspapers, allowing them to continue publishing the papers. The Pentagon Papers revelations added fuel to the growing anti-war sentiment in the U.S. and significantly eroded public trust in government. They also played a role in shaping the War Powers Act of 1973, a congressional resolution aimed at limiting the president's power to commit U.S. forces abroad without congressional approval. Despite the momentous impact of the Pentagon Papers' disclosure, the consequences for those responsible for the decades-long deception were minimal. No government official was held legally accountable, and Daniel Ellsberg, who faced charges under the Espionage Act for leaking the papers, saw his case dismissed due to governmental misconduct. The Pentagon Papers case underscores the crucial role of a free press in a democracy and the necessity of governmental transparency and accountability. The fact that it took a leak of classified information to expose the truth is a stark reminder of the potential for abuse of power and the need for vigilance and oversight. The legacy of the Pentagon Papers continues to resonate today, informing debates about governmental secrecy, the public's right to know, and the balance between national security and transparency. The release of the papers is a testament to the enduring power of truth in shaping history and the importance of courageous individuals like Daniel Ellsberg in standing up for that truth. Number 8. Operation Speedy Express, civilian casualties obscured. Among the various military operations during the Vietnam War, Operation Speedy Express stands as a chilling testament to the devaluation of civilian life and the lengths to which the U.S. government went to hide this reality. This 6-month operation from December 1968 to May 1969, conducted by the U.S. 9th Infantry Division in the Mekong Delta, sought to deny Viet Cong access to resources and support. The strategy and conduct of Operation Speedy Express, however, led to a disproportionately high number of civilian casualties. The operation relied heavily on artillery and air power, and nighttime free-fire zones were established, within which anything moving could be considered a target. The indiscriminate use of firepower in these densely populated areas resulted in a large number of civilian deaths. Yet, despite these damning findings, the U.S. government and military establishment largely ignored the controversy. The government did not initiate a thorough investigation into the operation, and the military dismissed Newsweek's report, stating that civilian casualty figures were exaggerated. No one was held accountable, and the story slowly faded from public view. The lack of a proper investigation and accountability for the civilian deaths during Operation Speedy Express reflects a disturbing disregard for the value of non-American lives. It reveals the flaws in a military strategy that prizes body counts as a measure of success and shows a willingness to sacrifice civilian lives in the pursuit of military objectives. More profoundly, the cover-up of civilian casualties during Operation Speedy Express speaks to a wider pattern of deception and denial by the U.S. government during the Vietnam War. The operation and the response to its aftermath show a government willing to obscure the truth to protect its image and perpetuate a war that was increasingly unpopular at home. Operation Speedy Express is a sobering chapter of the Vietnam War, one that raises important questions about the conduct of war, the value we place on human life, and the necessity of transparency and accountability in the conduct of military operations. It serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of war, particularly for civilians, and the importance of accurate reporting in understanding the true impact of conflict. Number 9. The misreporting of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. One of the most critical moments in the U.S. escalation of the Vietnam War was built on misinformation and misrepresentation. This was the Gulf of Tonkin incident of August 1964, where the U.S. government asserted that 2 U.S. naval destroyers were attacked by North Vietnamese vessels in international waters. This alleged unprovoked attack was used as a pretext for a significant military escalation by the U.S., despite lingering questions about what truly happened. On August 2, 1964, the destroyer USS Maddox was reportedly attacked by North Vietnamese patrol boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. 2 days later, on August 4th, a second attack was reported, this time involving both the USS Maddox and USS Turner Joy. However, even at the time, there were doubts about the veracity of this second attack. These facts were not publicly known at the time, nor were they presented to Congress when it voted on the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Instead, the narrative of unprovoked aggression was propagated, providing a false justification for war. It wasn't until several years later, amidst growing disillusionment with the war, that the truth about the Gulf of Tonkin incidents began to emerge. The misrepresentation of the Gulf of Tonkin incident and the subsequent deception of Congress and the public is a stark example of the manipulation of information to achieve political and military goals. It led to a significant escalation of a war that would last for more than a decade, cost the lives of millions of people, and cause untold social and political upheaval. The legacy of the Gulf of Tonkin incident continues to resonate. It stands as a stark reminder of the importance of governmental transparency and the dangers of unchecked executive power. It underscores the necessity of critical analysis and skepticism in the face of governmental narratives, particularly when these narratives are used to justify military action and the potential loss of life. The Gulf of Tonkin incident serves as a lesson about the consequences of misinformation and the manipulation of truth. It is a reminder of the vital role of an informed public and a vigilant, questioning press in a democratic society, and the necessity of holding leaders accountable for their words and actions. Number 10. The ignored impact on Vietnam veterans, the aftermath of war. The Vietnam War left an indelible mark on the thousands of American soldiers who served. Yet the U.S. government's neglect of veterans' physical and mental health needs upon their return remains one of the most shameful aspects of the war. From post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, to the physical impacts of Agent Orange, many Vietnam veterans faced ongoing struggles, even as their experiences were often overlooked or misunderstood. The psychological effects of the Vietnam War on returning veterans were profound. The horrors of combat, coupled with the hostile reception many encountered at home, resulted in severe emotional and mental distress. However, the U.S. government was slow to acknowledge and address this issue. It wasn't until 1980, several years after the end of the war, that PTSD was formally recognized as a diagnosable condition by the American Psychiatric Association, largely due to the advocacy of Vietnam veterans and mental health professionals. Even then, the provision of mental health services for veterans was inadequate. Many veterans struggled to access quality mental health care through the Department of Veterans Affairs, VA, facing long waiting times, a lack of specialized services, and stigma associated with seeking help. This neglect led to an increase in homelessness, substance abuse, and suicide among Vietnam veterans, a crisis that persists even today. On the physical front, exposure to Agent Orange and other defoliants used by the U.S. during the war resulted in a range of serious health issues for veterans, from cancers to neurological disorders. However, the government's response was equally lackluster. It took years of lobbying by veterans groups for the government to acknowledge the link between Agent Orange and the health issues veterans were experiencing. Even after this admission, the fight for compensation and treatment was an uphill battle. The VA was slow to process claims related to Agent Orange exposure, and many veterans died before receiving compensation. Moreover, the amount of compensation provided often fell short of the medical costs veterans incurred, adding financial hardship to their health struggles. The legacy of the Vietnam War's impact on veterans persists today. It stands as a sobering reminder of the need for continued advocacy for veterans' rights and the provision of adequate mental and physical health services. It also underscores the necessity of societal understanding and acceptance in facilitating veterans' reintegration and healing. Despite the numerous challenges they faced, many Vietnam veterans have shown remarkable resilience, contributing to their communities, advocating for veterans' rights, and working to ensure that future generations of veterans receive the support they need. Their experiences and the U.S. government's response to them offer critical lessons about the true cost of war, the importance of accountability, and the enduring impact of military service on those who serve.